What's up guys, Houndish here, and today it's TWAB Day, which of course is this week at Bungie, Bungie's weekly update, and we do have some news to talk about. This one in particular is a fairly long edition of TWAB, and the main focus of it is for ability tuning that we're going to see in the update on December 7th. So there are lots of changes to round up for that patch, guys, and as always Bungie have a couple of other updates in the TWAB which we'll mention. And so if you do enjoy the video, be sure to get subscribed to the channel so I can keep you posted with Destiny content, but now let's get into it. Bungie get immediately into the sandbox stuff for this TWAB, and brace yourself, there are a lot of changes to go over. And they start out by saying earlier this year, we heard overwhelming feedback that the Crucible has largely been dominated by ability usage, and players felt that abilities were firing off too frequently, with too much potency and too little investment. At its core, Destiny is a game about space magic, so any adjustments to our abilities must be made with care, and we believe that the changes we've made will keep the heart of what makes Destiny abilities fun, while shaving down some of the excessive cases that we've seen out there. This means that we're building new foundational systems, like the ones you're about to read about today. And so they say in the 30th anniversary patch, we're changing the way ability cooldowns work. Up until now, cooldowns across individual ability types like grenade, melee, class, and super have generally been identical between all abilities of the same type. But we've made a change that allows us to tune the cooldown of each ability separately, and this gives us a new knob to turn when balancing abilities that are too powerful or not powerful enough. And so an example of some of the changes they're making includes the Flux Grenade. They say they've increased the base cooldown from 82 seconds to 182 seconds. They've increased the attached detonation damage from 150 to 250, so it's a one-shot kill in PvP, and they've increased damage versus PvE combatants by 15%. But they've removed projectile tracking, added a small amount of aim assist, increased the throw speed by 117%, and they will now stick to all surfaces. And they say, as you can see, the Flux Grenade now has a very long cooldown, but it's a one-shot kill in PvP if you manage to land it, and it hits harder in PvE. Another example would be Fireball Grenades, and they've reduced the base damage cooldown from 82 to 64 seconds, but then reduced the damage per bolt from 90 to 65, and increased damage versus PvE combatants by 15%. And the Fireball Grenade now has a low cooldown time, but also has a low damage output. And so we can start to get a sense immediately of how these changes are going to affect the game. And they say to make build crafting around cooldowns easier, you'll now be able to see the base cooldown time of your abilities when selecting them on the subclass screen. But on top of this, on the character screen, you'll see the actual cooldown time of your abilities as they're affected by your equipped ability and armor stats. And so give us your thoughts about that, and by the looks of it, there'll be quite a few more changes that we'll see in the actual patch notes. But they say also to bring the focus more onto gunplay, they're going to be adjusting passive regeneration for supers as well as the super energy you gain by dealing and taking damage to or from combatants. And to that end, they say they've separated supers into cooldown tiers that affect both the passive regeneration rate and the damage-based regeneration rate. This tiering is primarily influenced by each super's kill potential, where most one-off supers are unlikely to wipe a team or a room of combatants, but a long-lasting roaming super can and should have a trade-off as a result. And so different supers are going to have different regeneration tiers, and they say it's important to stress that this is the first iteration of the system, and these are the tiers that'll be launching on December 7th. So tier 5 with the fastest regeneration will include Well of Radiance, tier 4 will be Blade Barrage and Silence and Squall, tier 3 will include Shadow Shot, Burning Maul, Arc Staff, Nova Bomb and Thunder Crash, tier 2 Golden Gun, Chaos Reach, Nova Warp, Storm Trance, Daybreak and Sentinel Shield, and then tier 1 with the slowest regen will include Spectral Blades, Fist of Havoc, Hammer of Soul, Glacial Quake, and Winter's Wrath. So they're moving to a system where the kills potential for various supers is actually affecting the rates that they're going to regen at, which is quite an interesting change. Give us your thoughts about it below. And they say also to mix up the balance, they're going to be looking at various different neutral game perks. And they say the following perks have had their ability energy regeneration reduced by roughly 50% in PvP. They've targeted perks that can either activate out of combat with a single button press, or those that were returning amounts of ability energy that were significantly out of hand. And as we can see, that'll include Whisper of Shards, Arc Web, Rising Storm, Ionic Traces, Electrostatic Surge, Aftershocks, Inertia Override, Benevolent Dawn, Practice Makes Perfect, and Dark Matter. All of them going to see roughly 50% slower regens in PvP. And then for subclass in super perks, they say these perks scale down energy returns as you get kills in your super, meaning the first kill in a super will return more super energy than the third kill, and these perks often result in supers being able to roam the map for much longer than is healthy for the game. And so they've rescaled the energy refund decay more aggressively in PvP, so that the minimum energy refund is reached roughly twice as quickly, and that's going to affect Everlasting Fire from Dawnblade and Trample from Strikers. But this kind of tuning will also touch various exotic armor, and Frosties will no longer stack multiplicatively in PvP with other regeneration buffs, and is now an additive scaler, which won't affect PvE. For the Heart of Inmost Light, ability energy regeneration scalars have been reduced by 50% in PvP, and it's reworked so activating multiple abilities will now reliably result in multiple empowered stacks. And then for Controverse Hold, the duration of the grenade regeneration buff is no longer random between 1 and 4 seconds, and is now a fixed duration of 1.75 seconds, and they've also reduced grenade energy regeneration scalar by 50% in PvP. Doomfang Pauldrons will see reduced super energy gain on activation when an opposing player is killed by a void melee by 50%. Again, no change in PvE. But for Shinobu's Vow, they've reduced the grenade energy gain on hits versus players by 66%. For Crown of Tempests, grenade, melee, and super energy regeneration scalar buff duration has been reduced from 7 to 4 seconds in PvP. And for the Stag, they've reduced class ability energy refund on Shield Break by 50%. Again, that's only in the Crucible, but the refunded energy in general on these exotics is being reduced quite significantly in the Crucible. They also say they've reduced the energy returns from various armor mods by roughly 50%, depending on the number of copies of the mod you've got slotted, but it will include melee kickstart, grenade kickstart, and utility kickstart, as well as perpetuation, bolstering detonation, focusing strike, bomber, outreach, dynamo, distribution, momentum transfer, and impact induction. Then they talk about other specific abilities, and starting with Stasis Crystals. While forming, Stasis Crystals now slow nearby players instead of freezing them. They still freeze PvE combatants when forming, but they've increased the slow and freeze radius while forming from 1.75 to 2.6 meters. Reduce crystal detonation damage against players by 55%, increase the damage versus PvE combatants by 60%, and then increase the detonation radius from 6 to 8 meters. For other subclass perk-specific changes, for Hunter Dodge, they say it no longer breaks projectile tracking. For Marksman's Dodge specifically, Tier 10 mobility cooldown has been increased from 11 to 14 seconds, and the base cooldown is unchanged at 29 seconds. Then for Gambler's Dodge, Tier 10 mobility cooldown is increased from 11 to 18 seconds, with the base cooldown duration from 29 to 38 seconds. For Revenant, we get to Shadow Dive, and they say it's much less lethal versus players due to the Stasis Crystal changes, but it'll be more lethal versus combatants due to Stasis Crystal changes, and then they've increased the shadow damage from frozen PvE combatants by 100%. And for the Grim Harvest aspect, they've increased the fragment slots from 2 to 3. So that's interesting. Primarily they're looking at Stasis Crystals in order to adjust that. And we've also got Top Tree Arcstrider, and for Combination Blow, they've reduced the base cooldown duration from 96 to 15 seconds. And for Vanishing Smoke on Night Stalker, they've reduced the base cooldown from 96 to 75 seconds. Now for shoulder charges, quite big changes here. They no longer one-shot players, so back to how they were when D2 launched. The sprint activation time has been reduced from 1.5 to 1.25 seconds. They've also increased the range from 5.5 to 6.8 meters. Also, the targeting cone width has been increased by 10%, and they've increased damage versus PvE combatants by 25%. So it'll be easier to pull them off. They'll do more damage in PvE, but they're going to be a lot less lethal inside of PvP. And then there is Seismic Strike, where they've reduced the AoE damage from 90 to 40. It also now blinds enemies in the area on hit, and they've increased the base cooldown from 82 to 90 seconds. For Shield Bash, they've also reduced AoE damage from 90 to 40. They've increased the base cooldown from 82 to 90 seconds. And for Hammer Strike, they've reduced the direct impact damage from 170 to 120, as well as increasing the base cooldown from 82 to 90 seconds. There are even changes for Barricade, and for Towering Barricade, they've increased the base cooldown duration from 37 to 40 seconds, and for Rally, they've reduced the base cooldown duration from 37 to 32. And then we have Behemoth, and for the Diamond Lance, they've increased fragment slots from 1 to 3. And they now spawn a Diamond Lance upon killing a PvE combatant with a stasis weapon, killing 3 players with stasis weapons in a single life. killing an enemy with a stasis ability or shattering an enemy. For Shiver Strike, they've increased Shiver Strike damage while in Glacial Quake by 50%, and for Whisper of Chains, they've increased damage resistance versus PvE combatants from 25 to 40%. So it really is a mixed bag of changes here, and then we've got Bottom Tree Striker. And for Knockout, the melee lunge range and melee damage bonus now deactivates after a melee kill. For Trample, the super energy gained from Fist of Havoc glide attack will now decay to a minimum amount over 3 PvP kills, down from 7. For Frontal Assault, they've increased the base cooldown from 82 to 106 seconds, and for Fist of Havoc, the heavy slam radius has been reduced from 8 meters to 6 meters. And then we get onto Warlocks and uncharged melees. They say they've reduced the melee range from 5.5 meters to 4.5 meters, and that now matches Hunter and Titans, and they've reduced the suppression time after a melee, and you can now melee back to back at the same speed as Hunters and Titans. Middle Treed Voidwalker will see changes to handheld Supernova, and they've reduced damage versus players. It will now deal 150 maximum damage. They've increased damage versus champions and bosses by 30%, and they've increased projectile range from 12 to 14 meters. But also it now pushes targets away from the Warlock on detonation, and for Nova Warp, they've increased damage versus champions and bosses by 30%. Then finally we get Shadebinder, and for Winter's Wrath, they've reduced shatter pulse damage versus enemy supers, and you must now generally freeze and shatter all supers twice to eliminate them. For Penumbral Blast, they've increased proximity detonation radius versus PvE combatants by 100%, and for Bleak Watcher, while it's equipped, all stasis grenades will charge a Glacier grenade rate. And so that is quite a lot to really get our heads around, just looking at it on paper of course. I think it's safe to say, looking at all of the changes, quite a few abilities will feel significantly different, but also how often we actually get to use them will definitely be reduced, whether it's subclass perk changes, general cooldown adjustments, or indeed changes to those exotics that give us bonuses. Again, the goal though is to move towards a more gunplay focused Crucible in particular, and while some of the changes will affect PvE to some extent, there are probably more PvE buffs than anything else, so that's a positive, and otherwise I guess it depends what camp you fall into in terms of your opinions around abilities inside of PvP. I think these changes do sound like they could be pretty positive on the most part. Again, there are so many of them that we'll have to kind of get into the game and see how it plays out. But be sure to give us your thoughts down below, guys. And for today, that is the huge ability TWAB update that we've had. So I'll link it down below if you want to check any of it out. But if you've enjoyed the video, be sure to get subscribed to the channel so I can keep you posted with more Destiny content. Also, a like rating down below really does help us out as well. But otherwise, as always, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I hope you have an awesome day.